Hello there. This video is for anybody who intends to complete the challenges, reach level 90 as a hardcore character, and complete the Eternal Labyrinth in hardcore. It's going to be a sort of me retracing my steps, and hopefully it'll serve as a roadmap for players in the future wanting to do the same thing. So there is a Google document that I prepared, and I will leave a link to in the description of this video that I'm going to be drawing from, but you can go back and read it if that's more of your thing. The TLDR is that I played a Necromancer, and I adapted the build to include extra defensive layers since there's more than enough damage. I 4-link handled Tier 10 and Tier 11 maps with no issue, and I was very conservative with the content that I engaged with. I had about 34 hours played. I guess now I'm at 35. Some of that standing in hideout and purchasing gear and stuff like that, but that's about how long it took me. If you're watching in 310 or later, check to see if the Raised Spectre or the entire Necromancer Ascendancy gets nerfed. I don't have any reason to suspect that it will. I think the prime targets for the nerf hammer are going to be the Summon Skeleton Gem and the strength stacking mechanic, like the Baron, for instance. I don't think Raised Spectre is going to be touched much, if at all, and this build primarily revolves around Spectres for the damage, so I think we'll be good moving forward. So I suppose I'll take a moment to demonstrate the build. And this is a Tier 11 map. And I'm relying on Spectres for all of my damage. Everything else is just there for support. Use a shield charge to proc Fortify, so you sort of just run around, cast Convocations to recall your minions back to you. And as you can see, I'm on a 4-link here, and it's more than enough damage to get the job done. I've got over 6,000 effective HP, which keeps me pretty safe combined with all of my other defensive layers. And yeah, the damage is there. And with that out of the way, I will take a moment to kind of break down what's going on. So we're using Raised Spectres. I'm on a 4-link here. I am using Furty's Ultimate Raised Spectre build, which I will also leave a link to in the description. I made some small adjustments, just basically to accommodate for the Hardcore League and adding some defense. I played in Trade League. I did a run in Standard Hardcore, and I died at Piety. And then switched to Hardcore Metamorph and reached level 90 without any deaths. So we're here, Raised Spectre, minion damage, control destruction, spell echo. We're using Flesh Offering, Flame Dash and Convocation. I use a Chaos Golem for the physical reduction, an Animate Guardian that is linked with Feeding Frenzy, so is the Chaos Golem, and Elemental Army. Enfeeble, cast when damage taken, and Immortal Call all linked together at a low level. Zealotry is my aura. Desecrate, Dread Banner, since I had a little extra mana to squeeze it in, and Armageddon Brand, which procs Elemental Equilibrium, which is discussed in the full actual build guide if you want to investigate that more. I'm using Flesh and Stone as an aura for the blind while in Sand Stance. I never changed this. Shield Charge, Fortify, faster attacks, big chunk of damage reduction. As far as flasks, Bubbling Divine Flask, I got Bleed Removal, Used an amethyst flask with the curse removal. Granite flask for the armor, removing freeze. Zoom flask, and jade flask with additional evasion. So I got a lot of my bases covered here. The second slot is a bit of a utility swap slot. When I was doing lab trials, I would use something like this. And if I had shocking ground on a map, or I was fighting a lightning boss, or really you can just substitute this with anything else, any flask that you were to kind of plug some holes where you feel like you need some more defense. So I talked about how I engaged in content very conservatively. Let me just give you some examples of some maps that I would run. This would be an example of a map that I would run. It only has 1 extra damage mod on it, and it's relatively safe. This is also an example of a map that I would run, and it's actually a pretty juicy map, but still it's pretty safe. And this would be an example of a map that I would roll over, or just completely skip. The shocking ground, extra damage as lightning, and the unique boss dealing extra damage make it pretty spooky and gives you a chance to get killed. So this would be something that I would roll over. So let's reference the document here and just talk about what I did. So starting off, I used zombies and summon raging spirits linked with minion damage and melee splash. In Act 2, I helped Delirium for the resistances. I picked up an early She-Breath and Bones of Uller, and before I get a bunch of comments, this is pronounced she, if you look it up on the Google. So yeah, I bought these for an alchemy each. So another thing I would say, I'll just add it right now. I recommend playing in a trade league that is relatively stable. Let's change all this stuff. Alright, so it'll make acquiring some of the uniques easier when you play in a trade league that's a little further along. I would say, you know, a month in or even 2 months in. So, yeah, I bought these for about an alchemy each. And I used skitterbots in Act 2. In Act 3... I started using Zealotry and Flesh and Stone, and you have to get Flesh and Stone from the library quest. I swapped Summon Raging Spirits for Specters. I got Flame Sentinels in the Battlefront, and I used Minion Life Support on them to keep them alive, but if you use some different... if you path on your skill tree better than I did, then you won't need minion life support. So let's cover that really quick. If you go from the beginning, if you come up here, like what you should generally do is come up here, grab the spell damage node, and come up and grab Lord of the Dead. And then what I did after that was I went up immediately to grab Death Attunement, but I don't think that's what you should do. I think what you should do is once you grab Lord of the Dead, you should come down and immediately grab Sacrifice. And then you should run down and grab Indomitable Army. And when you do that, your zombies will stay alive longer. And consequently, when you eventually do upgrade into Specters, they will stay alive. And then from there, you can move up and grab Death Attunement, because this will be right around the time or shortly after you get specters, so you can benefit from having the extra specter. But when you finally get specters in Act 3, you'll still be relying on your summon raging spirits and your zombies for your main DPS. So, moving along, I stopped doing the metamorphs in Act 3 or 4, just because they could be pretty rippy, and I didn't want to take the chance. I'm not 100% sure that Flame Sentinels are the best choice for a Spectre. There might be something out there if you do a little bit of homework. You can find something. I didn't worry about it too much because we're just talking from the end of Act 3 until Act 5. So, and I wasn't really leaning on them for all of my damage anyway. So I just picked something that I knew was decent and just ran with that. I didn't run the Immortal Syndicate. These are sort of out of order at this point. I was just writing down my thoughts as I went along. I did not interact with the Syndicate at all. I didn't click unidentified strong boxes. I skipped really rippy ones. For instance, like freezes you plus detonate. I think I skipped most detonate boxes, period, because that could just flat out kill you. I did the library quest to get Shield Charge, Fortify, and Flesh and Stone, which helped with my defenses considerably. I did normal lab around 35, which is, I want to say, slightly over leveled. I don't remember what the monster level is. I think it's like 33 or 35, but I had no problems whatsoever. In Act 4, I got Summon Carrion Golem, and at the same time, right around the time that you get this, you also get Spell Echo, which is a huge DPS bonus when you finally do switch to your slave drivers in Act 5, and you'll notice it right away. You will get a lot more damage. I took the Granite Flask in Act 7. When you do the quest right at the beginning of Act 7, you get the quest from Whalem to get the Silver Locket. You take the Granite Flask. I'm diversifying my defensive layers here. I think at this time I am running the Stibnite Flask that I list down here. So I've got some evasion, I've got some armor, I've got blind from Flesh and Stone, I've got Fortify from Shield Charge, I got a little bit of Energy Shield, so I'm really mixing up my defensive layers here, and it made for a very safe, tanky character. I bought a Wrath Lord with my first Chaos drop in Act 7, and then at that point you get 1,000 flat life to your Spectres, so I just switched Minion Life for a DPS gem. But again, if you follow my suggestion about speccing into Minion Life early, you won't even need a Minion Life gem in the beginning. I eventually switched to Feeding Frenzy support for the zombies. That was probably when I put it on a 4 link. I think I just added it to the existing setup. I skipped my Pantheon bosses until I was very over-leveled. Some of them, like Growth Coal, could be very, very rippy. Yugal could be rippy too. So I think I came back and did these like right before I killed Kataba. For flasks, Granite, Stibnite, Quicksilver, and 2 life flasks. I would swap the second life flask for a specialty flask like an Amethyst, Topaz. We went over this just a few minutes ago for specific fights. But generally, I kept 2 life flasks on just in case as I was going through and doing my lab trials. If things got really spooky and got low, I had an extra life flask. I took the Constitution Wheel of Life as soon as possible. I had that probably before Act 9. Yeah, I kind of went right to it when I could. I bought a Vis Mortis chess piece for 1 Chaos in my late 50s. It's equipable at level 59, I want to say. Doesn't say because I got gems in it, but I'm pretty sure it's 59. When I got to Act 9, I farmed the Blood Aqueduct until level 70. So what I did there was I started doing unidentified chaos recipe, or at least I started doing my prep for it. I started filling up my tab with lots of gloves, boots, and small weapons, and whatever jewelry I can find. The jewelry was definitely on the scarcer side, but I was getting my base ready. I just filled up a quad tab with some other pieces just to get ready, because when I would go into maps, stuff would start dropping a little more frequently. I did vol side areas in the blood aqueducts. I advise you to proceed with caution if you're doing this in 3.10 or later, since they're buffing them. They were kind of a joke in 3.9. I think I found 3 humilities and a vanity. I sold the humilities for 3 chaos each, and the vanity card for 2 chaos, totaling to 11 chaos. You can consider doing your merciless lab if you're very experienced with the mechanics. I waited until after Kitava. I don't think you have to do this, but again, I played very very conservatively. And if you're on the beginning side, if you're more of a beginner player, you should probably wait. After Kitava, I used my currency just to get some cheap gear to cap the resist. I didn't spend any more than 10 or 12 chaos doing this. So let me show you what I used, because everything that I bought after killing Kitava and going into maps, I used all the way to 90. I didn't make any changes. So we're locked in with the Wraith Lord helmet. I used the Viz Mortis. This is just the +2 to socketed minion gems is pretty important with Wraith Spectre. And then I get a lot of energy shield here and extra damage from Viz Mortis. It's really kind of your best in slot chest piece up until the very, very late game. Life and resistances. Life and resistances. Life and resistance. Life and resistance. I've got Bones of Wool. And I went with Winterheart because after I had gotten everything else, I needed some dexterity and I needed a lot of cold resistance. So when I was doing some searching on the trade site, this just happened to provide both of those things. Victorio's Charity. This was a chaos, I believe. I think the most expensive thing was I spent 3 chaos on this wand. And I bought it basically just to have the 3 minion damage mods at the end there. So this is all very basic gear. It'll carry you all the way to 90 as long as you cap your resists and you get life. Energy shield helps too, since you're scaling it. Let's see here. Once I got the Victorio's Charity shield, I picked up Necromantic Aegis on the tree. I also spec'd into the cast when damage taken Immortal Call in Feeble setup. Again, another defensive layer. I ran Cruel Lab. I actually waited all the way until after the story to run Cruel Lab, which is really just a testament to the build's power. You can just run your normal lab at level 35 and you don't need the damage boost until after you get into maps. Again, you can run this sooner. Honestly, I probably just forgot about it and just decided to run Cruel Lab afterwards. At that point, I started looking at some long-term-ish goals. I had my eye on the unique Spectre Jewel, which ended up being too expensive. I was going to look at Anatomical Knowledge for life, which I ended up purchasing. I was going to consider 5-linking Viz Mortis for zombies. I ended up not doing it because I ended up dropping zombies, as you'll see later. Anime Guardian was on my radar as well, so I think probably at this time I bought an Anime Guardian gem and started leveling it in my offhand. I also considered running or acquiring a Corrupting Blood Jewel. they were sort of pricey. 20 chaos just for the implicit alone. So like we're talking like 20 chaos for getting corrupting blood on like you know, like a unique threshold jewel for frost blades or something, you know, like something where you would benefit from nothing on the jewel except for corrupting blood. So I never ended up getting it. If you're flush with currency, consider going for it. So once I got into maps, I swapped the second life flask for an amethyst flask. I know from personal experience that, you know, I've died from chaos resistance, so it was just sort of hedging my bets. I swapped my stibnite flask for a jade flask when I dropped, because the jade flask just gives you more evasion when you don't have much. I keep the second life flask in my inventory for when I encountered the Uber Lab trials. I ran Merciless Lab at level 82, having over 5k effective HP. You know, that's the combination of your life and your energy shield. I took Commander of Darkness, which gives you a bunch of resistances. And then I switched my Bandit reward to 2 passives. You do that with an Onyx Amulet and 20 Regret Orbs. I would have probably ran Merciless Lab earlier had I known that, because having 20 to all of your resistances makes it way easier to buy gear after you lose your resistances post Kitava. And I would definitely run that in softcore. I would run it before Kitava, or at least before buying your gear. You can consider the 3-to-1 map recipe. I didn't need it, but it's certainly an option for you. I didn't buy any maps from players. I bought Zana maps to flesh out the Atlas, but I didn't have to use trade. I really didn't have to use trade much at all after, you know, once I got res capped. Since my energy shield was at least 25% of my effective HP, I used it as a gauge for checking if I was taking significant damage. If I ran out of energy shield, I needed to pay extra attention. That means there's something spooky there that's dealing damage. I can also use the Immortal Call explosion animation to remind you too, although this goes off way more frequently. And in this particular setup, you can see not only is there an explosion from Immortal Call, there is also, you'll see the Enfeeble cast on the monsters around you. I stopped doing unidentified generic strong boxes. It took too much time to drop a scroll of wisdom on it and then read all the mods. So if it didn't provide anything that was going to be particularly beneficial to me, I just skipped the box. I ran the currency, jewelers, map, and divination boxes. The jewelers are good for rare amulets to flesh out your chaos recipe. At level 84, I bought a level 20 Ray Spectre Gem for 5 chaos, which combined with the +2 levels from the Ascendancy, +2 levels from the Wraith Lord, and +1 level from Bones of Oler gives me gem level 25 and a 4th Spectre. A lot of extra damage. Also, while I was at level 84, I dropped zombies since I got the 4th Spectre. I started using Animate Guardian because, again, with those aforementioned plus gem levels, I could get Animate Guardian to at least level 20. I spent less than 10C gearing it, which I'll go over in a second here. I swapped the Carrion Golem for Chaos Golem. Once you're not using any physical damage minions, Carrion Golem doesn't do anything for you. Chaos Golem just gives you some flat physical damage reduction. So here's what I used on my Animate Guardian. Dying Breath, Southbound, Victorio's Flight, Ambush, Charge, and Learcast, which is basically, if you read Furty's guide, it's the budget setup for Animate Guardian, just swapping Victorio's Flight for Rainbow Stride because Rainbow Stride was 20 chaos in the hardcore economy. I had extra mana and an empty socket. I had a Dread Banner. Dread Banner just reduces. We're not using the Impale at all. We're just using it to reduce nearby enemies' accuracy. Bought an Anatomical Knowledge at 86 for round 20 Chaos. Gave me a bunch of life. And I planned out my last couple passive points, which were going to be Jewel Sockets. I didn't do any prophecies. You can. I think the main reason why I was afraid of this was because I didn't want to do something like Possessed Foe or get Possessed Foe and then forget to seal it. Because I've died many times, even while leveling, I've died to Possessed Foe on a dangerous boss like Doedry or something like that. So I didn't do prophecies. You could. It's probably recommended. You just have to be diligent and pay extra attention and make sure you're not leaving any dangerous prophecies on your maps or in your prophecy area. As far as map mods, I didn't run crit and multi. I didn't run elemental reflect because your specters will one-shot themselves. Multiple increased damage mods, you know, just stacking on top of each other. I didn't run minus resists. I didn't run curse with vulnerability. And I didn't run chain because that'll get you killed too. Never under any circumstances do you run LE reflect or chain. I did Uber Lab at 89. I found all of my own trials. The quickest way to do it is to map quickly and use Zana missions. And the first thing when I do a Zana mission and I'm presented with the maps, the first thing I look for is Labyrinth trials. I'll take any runnable map that has a lab trial on it. So it didn't take too long to get all my lab trials. I actually had to wait, I want to say 2 days or a day and a half to run the lab on a safe day, because there were 2 days in a row where Zaro had dual swords, and one day it was dual swords and charged disruptors, which is just a no-no. It's an easy way to get killed. I had absolutely no problem with my Uber Lab. I believe I did like 4 keys. It was like he was like almost fully buffed up. I had no problem. Around this time, I also bought 2 opalescent oils for 20 chaos and anointed Ravenous Horde. Another big DPS. I stopped doing the chaos recipe at 89 because at that point I basically had everything I needed, and doing the chaos recipe is kind of slow. I want to say that doing the chaos recipe earned me about 80C, and I got the rest of my money just from raw chaos drops. I didn't do much trading at all other than the initial burst of trading with the divination cards back in Blood Aqueducts. I ran every tier 6 to 10 map I could. Sometimes I'd brick them and not have the currency to reroll. When I was nearing level 90, I used all the currency I could to safely juice up my maps. 4 chisels, sacrifice fragments. Hell, I even started rolling the maps, re-rolling them with chaos orbs, since I knew I had everything I needed and I had 20-something chaos left. Regarding Delve, I worked on Darkness Resistant and Light Radius immediately, and I upgraded everything else when it was really cheap to do so. I broke fractured walls when they were easily visible from the main path. I didn't go off on a tangent exploring tons of darkness, because that's an easy way to get killed too if you get trapped and stuck. I took every jewelry node that I could, again, to supplement the chaos recipe. And then I started going sideways around depth 79. I started getting frozen by mobs in 80+, so that was kind of dangerous. And it was good EXP. It was good for supplementing, You know, since the yellow map pool would kind of go up and down and kind of swing to from one extreme to another. And that's basically what I did. Again, I chose Necro because you don't have to engage much with the actual monsters. If there's something that seems dangerous, you can stay on the outskirts and let your minions do all the damage. It's very safe, and I think it's a preferable alternative than trying to do something like melee or even a spellcaster. So I hope this is of some help to you. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. I'll do the best that I can to get back to you in a timely fashion and maybe explain something that I missed or further elaborate on something that might not be clearly explained. So good luck to you and take care.